Hello, and welcome to a new episode of The Career Changers. Our guest today is Lynn Thompson. After building a career as a lawyer, she embraced her love of poetry in full, publishing just three collections before she was named Poet Laureate of Los Angeles in 2021. Her fourth collection, Blue on a Blue Palette, reflects on the condition of women, their joys despite their histories. Today, we are going to talk about her career change and how to become a poet. Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with your background, or better, your childhood. What was your dream job when you were a child?
I wanted to be a ballerina. My family had taken me to see the ballet, and I thought it was just beautiful, and surely I could do that. I did take the lessons, but I didn't get very far.
Oh, that's a typical dream
Yes.
for girls. And how was school for you? Did you enjoy it? And what did you decide to do after that? What is your educational background?
So I did enjoy school, and I was a pretty good student. Probably could have been better. Most people would say, yeah, I could have tried a little bit harder. I wasn't great in math, but I ended up going to Scripps College for my BA in social psychology. Scripps is a small women's college in Southern California. And I liked that it was small and the classes were really intimate with the professors. And I followed that up by going to Southwestern Law School of Law, also in Los Angeles. A few years after I graduated from college, I took a little bit of a break, but that's what I ultimately did.
And then how did you progress from that? What was your first job?
So I really worked in small law firms, a couple of small law firms here in Los Angeles, both of which don't exist anymore. It seems that things do come and go in that way. And I also worked for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which is the local bus company here in Los Angeles. But when I decided that I wanted to really devote myself to poetry as much as possible, I spent the last 20 years of my career at UCLA heading up their labor and employment office. So I could use my legal background, but I didn't have to be in court every day.
Hmm. What initially drew you to a career in law? Was it something like intrinsic motivation, or was like your parents telling you this is the right thing to do?
I think my parents wanted me to get a practical job. And so I was looking for that. But I was also a legal secretary right after I graduated from college and before I went to law school. And I thought, first of all, I was intrigued with the law, how it worked, how it didn't work, et cetera. And I thought, I can do that. How hard could it be? And I grew up in a time of a lot of television programs with lawyers, and they always won their cases and had these dramatic flourishes in court, which is not how it really happens. But nevertheless, I think all those things came together to influence me to do that.
Mm. So you went from a childhood dream of becoming a ballerina to working in law. And when was in your life that you felt inspired to make a significant shift from law to poetry? And where was this passion hidden?
I had always liked poetry. My father read poetry to me as a young girl, and I had written a few very bad poems, as teenagers are sometimes led to do. And I had always had a love of it. And somewhere along the line, practicing law, I literally woke up one day and said, the thing that's wrong with your life is that you're not writing poetry. And I think I always had this urge to be creative in some way, and poetry was really the path to that creativity. So even though I loved the law intellectually, it wasn't feeding my soul in the way that being a creative person has done, and I knew it would do. So that is what really led me to say, perhaps I can do both. I wasn't interested in being a poor poet, thus the job at UCLA, but it did give me more time to pursue that dream.
Mm. And was there a particular moment or a specific event that made you realize poetry was your true calling?
I'm not sure there was a particular moment or event. I do remember in college that a youngish woman, African American woman, came and read her poems. And it was the first time that I could visualize myself as doing that, because frankly, most poetry that we were taught in school was dead white men. And so it was hard to really relate to the possibility that was something achievable for me. But once having heard her and continuing my interest, even though I was practicing law, really made me think, yes, this is something that I can work at and try to become good at.
So let's talk about the challenges and the rewards of this career. So first of all, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced during your career transition? Because I guess it's not that easy, especially nowadays, to become a poet.
That is correct. And because I didn't have an academic community, I didn't have a PhD in literature or an MFA or any of that, I didn't have a built-in community. So I had to try to figure out how do you make community? How do you fit into a community that is already pretty established? And when do you find the time to do that? Because I was working a full-time job. But I think for people that want to make changes in their lives, they find the time and they find the ways into whatever community it is that they're seeking to be a part of. And those were two things that I really worked on. I used every minute that wasn't committed to my paying job to reading poetry, meeting poets, going to readings, going to workshops, trying to develop myself in that world. And that's how I did it. But it was a bit of a challenge. It does take longer, perhaps, than if you go the academic route, but it's no less fulfilling and in some ways more fulfilling because you've made your own path.
Yeah. And I think definitely the transition usually is one of the most difficult time because you're leaving something behind that doesn't belong to you anymore, but you still haven't found your new dimension. And so it can be scary and also lonely.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so how did you overcome any doubts or fears about leaving a stable career in law for the uncertain path of a poet?
One could say that I still have doubts from time to time. It's something to put your work out there, something that you've spent hours trying to develop, and you put it out in the world, hoping that people will enjoy it as much as you do. And sometimes they don't, and you have to live with that as a reality and not quit because of it. You have to develop a certain amount of belief in yourself, understanding that you yourself are always going to be asking, gee, was this the right choice? I think for me that it was. I think coming to poetry a little later in life than some of my fellow poets that I know and love and work with now was better for me personally because I had more of an ability to take the ups and downs that I might have when I was 20 or 25. I recognized that it wasn't going to be smooth sailing. And I had a lot of people to encourage me. And I think that's why the community aspect of it is so important.
So let's talk about the creative process for anyone that is interested in exploring this type of career. Can you describe your creative process when writing poetry?
I think it's important as a creative of any kind, whether you're a sculptor or a musician, a dancer, a writer, to listen, to be open to those things that might be antithetical to your nature. For me, more experimental poetry isn't what I really feel comfortable doing. So I try to read as much of it as I can and listen to people talk about it and read essays about it, etc. So my process in terms of how I come up with material is that everything is available to me. Overheard conversations, music, something that I see visually, a dance perhaps, all of that is grist for the mill, as well as the recognition of the world that we're living in, where climate catastrophes seem to occur on a daily basis, where the political scene is a lot of upheaval, not just in America, but throughout the world. And those issues, of course, play a great part in my work as well.
And what is your greatest source of inspiration?
I consider myself a storyteller at heart who's chosen the genre of poetry to tell those stories. And one of the things I wanted to accomplish and still work on regularly is telling my family story, because my parents were immigrants to this country. But for the little ones in my family, those who are being born now and have been born in the last 10, 20 years, even since both of my parents have passed away, don't know that story and how it fits into the story of America and has contributed to make them who they are. So I try to write a lot of personal history and then a greater public history. Those are two passions of mine. And beyond that, it's just anything that may appeal. I can see a spider on a wall and make something out of that. Where is that spider going? And wouldn't it be great to follow that spider? As I said, I try to be open to whatever inspiration may pop up, but I also have a great focus on both personal and public history.
So I guess part of the creative process of becoming a poet is also the possibility to express our own personal values and maybe to give a message out there. How have your personal values influenced your work as a poet?
I think, and perhaps this goes back to my legal background, I'm also always negotiating between ideas. There's a poem in my latest collection, Blue on a Blue Palette, for example, that's called Revelations, that talks about the yin and yang of organized faith. And do I believe in church or the Bible or whatever, and the back and forth of that. So I do see my personal values are really grounded in this idea of negotiating the world that we live in and its opposites that exist in every sphere of our lives and coming to grips with that. So I think that plays a great deal of importance in my poems.
Mm. So let's talk about recognition and achievements. After you started this career, after a few years, you've been named a Poet Laureate of Los Angeles in 2021. What did this mean to you?
Oh my goodness, talk about a sense of validation for all of the people who were skeptical, many in my family, a lot of my lawyer friends who said, "Are you crazy? Why are you doing this?" I remember my mom saying, "Is there any money in it?" And I said, "Yeah, not really." So, uh, she was a little like, "Why would you do this?" So it was validation for the naysayers, but also for me personally, having made a decision to make a pretty severe career change. Not as a girl, I was well into middle life by the time I made this decision. This validated that I had made the right decision, that my work was worthy of recognition, and most important, that I was a good literary citizen, that I was not only, and I am not only interested in my own work, but I'm interested in the work of others and in promoting and supporting them as they have supported me. So it meant the world to me.
And how has this recognition impacted your career and your approach to poetry?
It's made me cognizant. If you're fortunate enough to have this sort of appointment come in your life, it means a lot of people are going to have eyes on you. Some negative, many and most positive. But it made me aware of how I looked to the public, particularly students and youth that are interested in maybe poetry, but maybe any kind of artistic or creative endeavor, that I want to put forth the best example that I possibly can as a poet. That doesn't mean always making everyone happy, because you can never do that, in my opinion, but at least being true to myself and showing that to the public.
Let's talk about the theme of your poetry. In your latest collection, Blue on a Blue Palette, you're talking about the condition of women. Can you share more about the themes and messages you wanted to convey through this work?
Absolutely. I didn't completely realize when I put the collection together that it would be as timely as it is in the way that women are seen and perceived all over the world. How our histories are often erased or marginalized, how women have been murdered merely for expressing their views, etc. So I wanted to do something about the history of women. I wanted to also, though, talk about how resilient we are as women, how we support one another, how much we believe in each other. That's being played out right now in America with the election or selection of Kamala Harris as our Democratic candidate for president. And the support, both by men and women, for her has been really overwhelming. And that's a really positive thing. But you're starting to hear a little backlash, which happens. You have that initial euphoria, and then you have a certain amount of backlash. So I wanted to talk about our joys and our frustrations and our resilience in the face of it all. And I think this is the moment to do that. I didn't plan this book. Someone suggested to me while I was serving as poet laureate, this would be a good time to look and see what poems you have and put them together. And that's when I recognized that so many of them were about the concerns of women, for autonomy for our bodies, and so many other issues. And I thought, okay, I think I have something here. And that is really how the book came together without there being a specific project in mind.
And how do you balance addressing serious issues with celebrating also the joys and resilience of women, if that's something you cover?
It is something I thought about a lot. As I was ordering a collection like this is always a challenge. And I would read some of the poems and said, oh, it's just so dreadful. It's just, where is the joy in it? So I looked for opportunities to infuse that joy so that, yes, there are a lot of worrisome, troublesome, scary things that have happened to women and continue to happen. But there are also some wonderful things that happen. And I talk about our sexuality and so forth, and even as we age, there is joy. And so I really wanted to look for opportunities to say there is this yin and yang, as I talked about earlier, between what women have had to overcome, how much we've overcome, and through it all, how we've looked for the joy in our lives, because otherwise you really would be just perpetually depressed.
Yeah, it seems that you're doing such amazing work. One question that comes up for me is what is the space of poetry in today's world where everything goes around technology and social media, in your experience?
People often ask, not just me, but all poets, why do you do it? Is it really important? Who cares? Nobody reads it. I had family members who said, don't you have a novel in you? Because people read novels more regularly. But I think poetry has a place. It is an oral art, and it has a place in the drumbeat of all of us, I think, because we know instinctively if there's a birthday, if there's a birth, a marriage, a graduation, any of those or more difficult events, 9/11 in this country, the war that's currently going on in the Middle East, those events demand a response. And people often look to the poets. They don't look necessarily to the novelists. They look to the poets to provide a succinct language to express what they may be feeling, or what they want to feel, or what they hope to see. Even in the world of AI and technology and all of that, which sometimes are beneficial tools, sometimes are not, I still think that drumbeat of poetry is something that we all hold, even when we're not aware of it. It's something that we know is important to our being.
Definitely. And I think it connects to our most emotional part. We are human beings and we live off feelings and emotions. So actually poetry allows for expressions of our feelings.
That's
So
absolutely true.
we're reaching the end of this episode, but we still have a few more questions. First of all, if anyone would like to reach out to you, how and where they can find you?
They can find me on my website, www, all one word, Lynne Thompson, Lynn with an E, .us. I have an events page there and pages with poems and information about my various books, as well as a contact page so that they can reach out to me personally if they'd like.
So looking back, how do you feel about your journey from lawyer to poet? Quite an unusual career change.
Yes, I feel really good about it. Of course, I'm saying that now from the perspective of having been selected as the poet laureate, having had my fourth book of poetry published. But it's been an interesting journey that really did feed my soul, even from the early days when I really didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't know anyone. I was trying to make it up as I went along. It's something that has fed my soul, and I always keep in mind a doctor that was my doctor at the time. And I took him a copy of my first book. And he said, you know what? I'm not worried about you. He said, because so often people just don't engage in life in ways that make them really happy. He said, and I'm looking at your face and I can just see the joy and pride in your face. And that is as great a contributor to good health as anything. And so I have decided to believe him. And that this journey has been one that is good for me spiritually, physically, mentally, every way that I can think of.
Mhm. So when we change career, it's not just only for our personal reward or satisfaction, definitely is part of our journey to self-realization, but also because we may have a mission. How do you feel through your work you're making the world a better place?
That's a big task, but I think everybody has a role to play in that. And to the extent that any of my poems allow the reader or the listener to think about an issue differently or more broadly than they once did, then I'm doing my small part to contribute to a more positive world. We're living in pretty negative times right now, and sometimes it's really hard. But if I can get one person to say, gee, I never thought about it that way, or I never looked at it from that angle, or I wasn't aware of that, I've learned something new, then I feel I've done my part to make the world a better place in a very small, small way,
Mhm.
but important way. If we each do that, we're in good shape.
I think it's really important to have someone that, as I say, in this world full of technology and social media, that keep poetry alive and can bring inspiration to other people. I think it's great. So, what type of advice would you give to someone who is listening to you and thinking, "Oh, I would like to change my career to pursue my passion in poetry"?
I would say go for it. Be kind to yourself. There are going to be times when it's tough. Be kind to yourself. You're growing, perhaps in a new field. Be patient. It doesn't click overnight for most people. I suppose there are some for whom it does, but for most of us, it's plodding away. It's doing the work and putting in the time, being patient, being supportive of others. Go for it, because I just think to pursue your passion is to extend your life in a beautiful way,
Mm.
because that's what's going to feed you in ways that maybe, I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that I didn't appreciate being an attorney. I'm glad I went to law school. I appreciate the training. And intellectually, it was satisfying, but as a soul mission, it was not satisfying for me. And so for others, it is. And I think that's a beautiful thing and a necessary thing. But for me, I needed something else. So I would say to anyone, when you start feeling that little, oh, I'm not quite satisfied, go out and find what's going to feed your heart.
Yes. And one more question before the last one. How did you develop a new relationship in this world of poetry? Do you remember a first person that maybe was a special connection to you that allowed you to move in the right direction, or maybe a group or someone?
Yes, I took an extension course at UCLA, a night course, not part of the regular course of classes at UCLA, with an instructor, Suzanne Lummis, and there were a class full of people like myself. We encouraged each other, not just in our work, but in ways to connect in the poetry community, where to go for readings, where we ourselves could share our work, where we might submit our work for publication. So I looked for opportunities like that. Suzanne's class was one of them, but there were many others. Sometimes I would go to a week retreat in the summer and spend a week just in a community of poets. And it was a beautiful thing that taught me not only the techniques and the craft of poetry, but also told me what it was like to be in a community of writers. And so I think whatever you're doing, whether it's cooking or sculpting or gardening, whatever it is, when you go out and with intention and positive thoughts, people tend to be supportive and to embrace new people that recognize what they're doing. So I think that's one of the ways that I was really able to burrow my way into a community that I didn't start out being part of.
Yeah, and I think that also not feeling alone is definitely playing its part in keeping us motivated and in moving forward when we start a new journey. So yes, time has gone really quickly, and we are approaching now really the end of this episode, and we have one more question. So if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say to your younger self?
Don't worry. Don't spend so much time worrying. How's it going to work out? Oh my goodness. It's going to work out, sometimes with your help and sometimes despite your help. And that's a lot of wasted energy to invest in worry. Am I good enough? If I could have put a lot of that aside, I could have started a lot sooner, and perhaps I'd have 10 books instead of 4. But I'm also fine with that. I took the path that I took, and it's worked out well for me. But to my younger self, I would say, tell the worry voice to go away and bother someone else.
Thank you, Lynn, so much for joining us today and sharing your inspirational career change story from lawyer to poet.
Thank you for having me. It's been delightful. I really appreciate your inviting me.
And a last message for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and tune in next week for a new inspirational episode of The Career Changers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.